guys. Welcome you all to the Insights into Books podcast. Before we start, kindly follow or subscribe us, and if you want daily summary files of these books, then subscribe us on Gumroad. Links are in description. Now, let's start today's discussion, guys. Okay, so today we are really diving deep into a book that it resonated with so many people, didn't it? Eat, Pray, Love. It feels like more than just a memoir sometimes.
Absolutely. It became this huge cultural thing.
Uh-huh.
And we're not just talking about, a travel story, pasta in Italy, ashrams, Bali. It's deeper.
Right. It's this whole chronicle of someone hitting rock bottom and then very deliberately, very intentionally trying to rebuild everything around these three simple words: eat, pray, love.
Exactly. And that's what we want to unpack today. The journey itself, the philosophy behind it, this idea of actively pursuing happiness. And also, we have to talk about the reaction it got. Because, wow, it was complex, lots of love, but also some pretty strong criticism.
Definitely. We'll get into all of that.
Yeah, our mission here is really to look beyond just the story of woman escapes bad life, finds herself. We want to synthesize how this journey was, in a way, quite structured, almost like a personal experiment.
Structured, how do you mean?
Well, how Liz, the author, moved from this place of complete despair, real despair, towards realizing that, happiness isn't passive. It's something you have to actively participate in. You have to sort of manifest your own blessings, as she puts it later.
Okay, actively participate. I like that.
And we want to connect that personal quest to some bigger ideas like psychological theories about what actually makes people fulfilled. Why did this life that looked so perfect on the outside feel so incredibly empty to her?
Let's start right there then, at the beginning. The crisis. She's in her early 30s.
Yeah, early 30s.
And she has what most people would probably consider, the dream. Successful writer, nice house, husband, all the boxes ticked.
All the external markers of success.
But inside, she describes it as just being consumed by panic, grief, and confusion. It's like the life she built suddenly felt like a trap.
It really did. A total collapse right in the middle of her life. Everything that was supposed to be stable and comforting just wasn't.
Yeah. And it wasn't just a vague unhappiness, was it? She is pretty specific about what she didn't want.
Oh, incredibly specific. The internal monologue she quotes is brutal. I don't want to be married anymore. I don't want to live in this big house. I don't want to have a baby.
Wow.
It's this complete rejection of the script. Not just, oh, maybe this marriage isn't working, but the whole setup, the whole Norman Rockwell existence, as she calls it, that she felt she was supposed to be building towards. She realized it just wasn't her desire. It was like she was playing a role.
A role she thought she should want.
Exactly. And that disconnect, that lack of authenticity, it was crushing her.
So you mentioned connecting this to psychological theories. How does someone with, a good career, a home, a partner, end up feeling that level of despair, suicidal thoughts even?
Well, that's where someone like Abraham Maslow comes in handy. His hierarchy of needs, right? It helps explain this kind of situation perfectly.
Okay, refresh my memory on Maslow's hierarchy.
Sure. So Maslow proposed this pyramid of human needs. At the bottom, you have the basic stuff. Physiological needs: food, water, shelter. Then safety needs: security, stability. Then love and belonging, friends, family, intimacy. Then esteem needs: achievement, recognition, respect.
Right. And Liz seemed to have all those covered, more or less.
Pretty much. She had the financial security, the stable home, the marriage, the successful career, giving her esteem. So the lower tiers were fulfilled. But Maslow argued there's a level above all that: self-actualization.
Richu.
It's about realizing your full potential, finding true meaning, purpose, living authentically according to your own values and desires. And that is where Liz was experiencing this massive deficit, a complete lack.
Okay, so even though the foundations were solid, the peak of the pyramid was just missing.
Totally missing. She felt this inanition, this emptiness in her heart. She mentioned waiting for the maternal instinct, that ticking clock for motherhood, to kick in, and it just didn't. She realized her wandering spirit, as she called it, wasn't meant for that settled life she was trying to force.
And without that sense of purpose, all the other stuff, the success, the house, it just felt hollow.
Exactly. It rendered it all meaningless, which is why the despair was so profound, leading to those dark thoughts. The life structure she'd built didn't align with her actual self.
Which explains why the solution had to be so drastic.
Utterly drastic. Filing for divorce, which was incredibly painful, then going through a really messy rebound relationship that crashed and burned.
And then the big leap.
The really big leap.
Yeah.
Quitting her job, selling basically everything she owned, and deciding to spend an entire year traveling. solo, across 3 different countries.
I mean, the scale of that decision is just huge.
Yeah.
It really speaks to how desperate she must have felt to just break free and start over.
It was a complete severing from her old life, a total demolition job to clear the ground for something new.
And we should probably mention the practical side of how she managed that. Because a year off traveling the world isn't exactly easy for most people.
Right, and this is important, and it comes up a lot in the critiques later. The trip was funded by a pretty substantial book advance. She pitched the idea for Eat, Pray, Love, and got the money up front to actually do the journey she was going to write about.
So the journey itself was sort of pre-packaged as a book project.
In a way, yes. And while some critics see that as undermining the, authenticity or universality of her quest, because, let's face it, not everyone gets a big book deal to fund their self-discovery.
Definitely not.
It also highlights the sheer intentionality of it all. This wasn't just her running away aimlessly. It was a planned, structured, financed investment in her own healing and recovery. The financial aspect is part of that structure.
That's a really interesting way to frame it. Not just running away, but a structured quest. Which brings us neatly to the structure of the journey in the book itself. Because it wasn't random, was it?
Not at all. The structure is actually quite ingenious.
Yeah.
It's probably a big part of why the book worked so well, both as a person project for her and commercially.
So what was the concept?
The core idea was precision. 3 countries, 4 months in each. And each country was chosen specifically to explore and heal one particular aspect of herself, setting against a culture that supposedly excels in that area.
Okay, break that down. What were the 3 parts?
Right. So first, Italy for 4 months, focusing on pleasure. Then India for 4 months, focusing on devotion or spirituality. And finally, Indonesia, specifically Bali, for 4 months, aiming for balance between the first 2.
Pleasure, devotion, balance, eat, pray, love. Simple, elegant.
Very elegant. But she added another layer of structure, something quite deliberate.
Oh, true.
The book is divided into 108 short chapters.
108. Why that specific number? It sounds symbolic.
It is highly symbolic. 108 is a sacred number in several Eastern religions, particularly Hinduism and Buddhism. It's often the number of beads on a japamala, those prayer beads used for chanting or meditation.
Ah, okay. So she structured the entire memoir like a string of prayer beads.
Exactly. It wasn't just about organizing the text. It framed the whole year, the whole narrative, as a kind of extended meditation, a spiritual discipline in itself.
That's clever. It signals right away that this isn't just a vacation diary. There's a deeper intention.
Precisely. It gave the whole project this conceptual integrity. And let's be honest, it was a fantastic marketing hook, too. Connected the travel structure directly to the theme of spiritual seeking.
Like, so that structure provides the framework. Let's get into the first section then. Eat, Italy. 4 months dedicated to pleasure.
Right. She lands in Rome, completely burnt out, emotionally exhausted from the divorce, the breakup. And her goal is basically just to experience joy again. Simple, unadulterated pleasure. La dolce vita.
And why Italy specifically? And why learn Italian?
Well, the language choice is telling. She says she chose Italian simply because she found it more beautiful than roses. There was no practical career reason. It was purely aesthetic.
Which seems like a deliberate pushback against that constant pressure for everything to be useful, productive.
Absolutely. She was consciously rejecting the idea that every choice needs a practical application. She just wanted to immerse herself in something beautiful for its own sake. It was part of rediscovering simple enjoyment.
And this ties into that psychological framework you mentioned earlier, Seligman.
Yes, Martin Seligman's positive psychology. This whole Italy section is a perfect embodiment of what he calls the pleasant life. It's the first level of his model of happiness, and it's all about learning to savor and appreciate basic positive emotions and experiences: food, beauty, sensory pleasure.
So after years of anxiety and guilt, she needed to learn how to just enjoy things again.
Exactly. And Italy, with its culture, its language, and especially its food, was the perfect place for that kind of sensory immersion therapy, if you will.
And did it work? Did she find that pleasure?
Oh, absolutely. She really commits to it. She describes that first night in Rome, she's expecting to just collapse in tears in her apartment. But instead, she goes out and has this amazing meal.
The food descriptions are pretty memorable, aren't they?
They really are. Spaghetti carbonara, fried zucchini blossoms, veal saltimbocca, tiramisu, a whole bottle of wine, just diving in. And the effect is immediate. She realizes, kind of shockingly, that she's actually okay, even bordering on content.
Wow. Just from one meal.
It sounds simple, but it was profound for her. The physical pleasure, the act of savoring something delicious, it grounded her in the present moment in a way she hadn't experienced in years. It was like the food itself was healing.
And it wasn't just big meals, right? It was the little things, too.
Yes, exactly. She talks about the joy of just arranging some eggs and asparagus on a plate to make a masterpiece of lunch and feeling this wave of happiness inhabiting her every molecule. It was about finding joy in the mundane, in the simple act of preparing and eating food. Consumption became presence.
It sounds idyllic, almost. But there was an unexpected twist in this pursuit of pleasure, wasn't there? Something about relationships.
Yes. This is really interesting. Amidst all this sensory indulgence in Italy, the land of romance, she makes a conscious decision to be celibate for the year.
Celibate. While focusing on pleasure, that seems counterintuitive.
It does, but it makes sense when you understand her reasoning. She looked back at her past relationships and realized she'd spent years sublimating herself to lovers. Basically, losing herself in relationships, seeking validation externally.
Using relationships to feel okay about herself.
Right. Dependency, essentially. So by choosing abstinence, especially in Italy, she was deliberately breaking that pattern. She was choosing self-acceptance and internal validation over relying on a partner to make her feel whole.
And this connects to the famous weight gain.
It does. She gains, as she puts it, 23 happiest pounds. And she owns it. It's presented as this physical manifestation of her choosing pleasure, choosing self-acceptance over the societal pressure to look a certain way, especially for male approval. The weight gain becomes a symbol of her liberation.
But was it all just gelato and happiness? Did the past intrude at all? The guilt?
Oh, definitely. The guilt was still there. She talks about hearing her ex-husband's voice in her head, basically accusing her of being selfish, of throwing away their life together just for pasta.
That must have been hard to deal with.
Yeah, she had to actively fight that guilt, reaffirm her choice. She asked herself, so this is what you gave up everything for? And her internal answer is a firm yes. She decides that the feeling of contentment she gets from simply savoring the meal in Italy is worth the pain of the past. It's a crucial step in processing that emotional exhaustion.
So Italy sort of rebuilds her foundation and allows her to feel okay again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It grounds her physically, emotionally. It teaches her how to experience joy again. But the pleasant life, as Seligman points out, is often fleeting. It's wonderful, but it's not enough on its own for deep, lasting fulfillment. She needed something more substantial.
Which leads her to India, the praise section.
Right, from the pursuit of earthly pleasure to the pursuit of spiritual devotion. She heads to an ashram for 4 months.
And what was the goal there? Just to meditate?
It was more ambitious than just meditation.
Mm.
She was seeking discipline, devotion, a connection to the divine. She wanted, in her words, a lasting experience of God, but importantly, without having to become a full-time ascetic or give up all worldly enjoyment, she was looking for a middle way.
A spiritual path that could integrate with a normal life.
Precisely. And this phase maps perfectly onto Seligman's second pillar of happiness, the good life.
Okay, what defines the good life?
The good life isn't about passive pleasure. It's about active engagement. It's about finding flow, being fully absorbed in challenging activities. It's about identifying and cultivating your inner strengths and virtues, like discipline, perseverance, kindness, and that requires effort, hard work.
And the ashram certainly provided the environment for that kind of hard work, didn't it? It wasn't easy for her.
Not at all. She really struggled, especially with meditation. Quieting her mind was a battle.
Yeah, she describes her mind as being like a churning engine.
Yeah.
Just constantly going.
Exactly. Restless, resistant. There's this one incredibly vivid scene where she's trying to meditate and she feels her mind actively fighting back, almost saying, I will never let you pass me by. It's this powerful depiction of how hard it is to break ingrained mental habits.
It shatters that illusion that spiritual practice is instantly calming or blissful.
Absolutely. It shows it as a real mental wrestling match. It requires discipline. Pushing through discomfort is not about instant gratification.
But she wasn't entirely alone in this struggle. She found a guide of sorts.
Yes, Richard from Texas, another Westerner at the ashram. Older, maybe wiser, definitely blunter. He becomes this sort of tough love, spiritual friend and mentor.
Okay, but wasn't there a risk there of just replacing dependency on a lover with dependency on a guru figure?
That's a really important question and something critics sometimes point out. On the surface, it might look like she's just swapping one male authority figure for another.
Right.
But if you look at the kind of advice Richard gives her, it's actually all about fostering her own agency, her own resilience. He doesn't offer easy answers or tell her what to believe. He tells her how to endure the process.
Like that moat analogy.
Exactly. That's
Uh,
classic. Which you want to get to the castle, you got to swim the moat. His point
okay.
is the struggle is unavoidable. You can't bypass the hard work. You have to go through it. Pain and effort are part of the deal.
That's pretty direct.
Very direct. And he gave her some incredibly practical tools for dealing with the lingering emotional stuff, too, like missing her ex-lover.
What was his advice on that?
She admits she still misses this guy, David, the rebound relationship. And Richard just cuts right through the drama. He says basically, so miss him, send him some light and love every time you think of him, then drop it.
Drop it. Just like that.
Just like that. Acknowledge the feeling, wish him well energetically, and then consciously let it go. Don't dwell, don't spiral. It's about emotional boundary setting.
Powerful. And he had that interesting take on soulmates, too.
Yeah, another piece of wisdom. He suggests that soulmates aren't necessarily about forever. Sometimes they come into your life to shake things up, to show you parts of yourself, maybe difficult parts that you need to see. And then their job is done, and they leave. And yeah, it hurts, but it's ultimately a gift for your own growth.
So his guidance was really about her taking responsibility for her own internal state.
Absolutely. It was all about processing things internally, building her own strength, not looking for external fixes.
And it did all this effort, the meditation, the guidance. Did it lead to a breakthrough for her?
It did. After months of this relentless, often frustrating work, she finally experienced this profound sense of release, of forgiveness.
What did that feel like for her?
She describes it as this moment where she realized it was over. Not just the marriage, not just the divorce, but all the lingering, unfinished, bleak, hollow sadness associated with it. It was just lifted the deep, cleansing feeling of being emotionally free.
Wow. That must have been huge.
Huge. And she marks this feeling, this newfound sense of self-possession and liberation with this spontaneous physical act.
The handstand.
The handstand on the guru's roof.
Yeah.
It's such a great image.
Why a handstand, do you think? What did that symbolize?
For her, it was this physical proof of her own strength, her own balance. She realizes, we have hands, we can stand on them if we want to. That's our privilege as human beings. It wasn't just a mental or spiritual shift. It was embodied. She felt strong, grounded, balanced in a way she never had before.
So India gave her the inner strength, the spiritual grounding.
Exactly. That deep silence, that connection she found within herself, it gave her the capacity, the agency to move into the final phase, which was all about integration, taking the pleasures she found in Italy and the discipline she found in India and weaving them together.
Which brings us to Bali, Indonesia, the love section. And the goal here was balance.
Yes, equipoise is the word she uses. Finding a balance between worldly enjoyment and spiritual transcendence, living fully in the world, but with that deeper connection she'd cultivated.
And how does this fit into Seligman's model? We had pleasant life, good life.
This aligns perfectly with Seligman's third and highest level, the meaningful life. This is where you use your unique strengths, the ones you identified and developed in the good life phase, in the service of something larger than yourself. Finding purpose, contributing.
Okay, so how did she pursue that in Bali?
Well, Bali itself felt like the right place for this integration, a culture known for balancing spirituality with everyday life. Her main guide there was Ketut Liar, this elderly Balinese medicine man.
The one who kind of looks like Yoda?
Huh. Yes, that's how she describes him. And Ketut was significant because he'd actually read her palm years before, during a previous trip, and apparently predicted she would return to Bali to study with him.
Whoa, really? So there was this sense of destiny almost?
Exactly. A layer of karmic inevitability, which fits the spiritual context.
And what was Ketut's core teaching for her? What was his philosophy on balance?
He gave her this really beautiful, simple lesson, illustrated with a drawing. He told her she needed to find stability, grounding. His advice was, you must keep your feet grounded so firmly on the earth that it's like you have 4 legs.
4 legs, like an animal.
Kind of, meaning super stable, super present in the physical world, don't float away. But then he added the crucial part. But you must stop looking at the world through your head. You must look through your heart instead. That way you will know God.
So be grounded, but lead with the heart, not just the intellect.
Exactly. Find that balance between earthly stability and heartfelt spiritual perception. That's equipoise.
And did she take that lesson to heart? Did it change how she saw herself?
It seems like it really landed. This is where she fully embraces the idea that happiness is the result of personal effort. You have to fight for it, insist on it. She stops seeing herself as a victim of circumstance and starts viewing herself as the administrator of her own rescue.
Administrator of her own rescue. I like that. Taking charge.
Totally taking charge. She's found her strength, her authentic self, and now she feels capable of navigating the world, including relationships, without losing herself.
Which, of course, leads to the love part of Eat, Pray, Love. She meets Felipe.
Yes, the unexpected romance. She'd sworn off men for the year, right?
Yeah.
As part of breaking that dependency cycle. But then she meets Felipe, this charismatic Brazilian expat living in Bali.
And she falls for him. Was that a step backward then?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? The book presents it as the opposite. The argument is that because she had found herself first, because she was self-reliant and whole on her own, she was finally capable of entering a relationship healthily.
From a place of choice, not need.
Exactly. Felipe is described as being very caring, a caregiver by nature. And he eventually says to her, "Let me take care of you forever." And for Liz, at this point in her journey, having done the incredibly hard work, this offer feels fulfilling, not suffocating. She feels ready to share her life, not lose it in someone else's.
We'll definitely come back to how others interpreted that ending. But the meaningful life wasn't just about romance, was it? There's another key relationship in Bali.
Absolutely crucial. Her connection with Wan, a local healer and single mother. This is where the journey really turns outward, towards that service aspect of the meaningful life.
Tell us about Wan.
Wan is struggling. She's a healer, but she's divorced, raising her daughter, even taking in other kids who need help. She's barely scraping by financially. And Liz witnesses this struggle firsthand.
And feels compelled to help.
Deeply compelled, protective even. She sees Wan's situation, and it sparks this desire to use her own resources, her own strengths, to make a difference. This is where she consciously uses what the sources call her masculinized privilege, her position as a relatively wealthy Western woman with connections.
How did she use that privilege?
She basically launched an email fundraising campaign. She reached out to her network of friends and family around the world, told them Wan's story, and asked for donations.
And it worked.
It worked spectacularly. She raised $18,000, a huge amount, enough to help Wan buy land and build a proper home and clinic space.
Wow, that's a very tangible act of contribution.
It is, becoming Wan's economic benefactor, as the text puts it. This act of organizing help, of using her platform and connections for someone else's benefit, is presented as the culmination of her journey. It's the final piece of the meaningful life puzzle, using her self-actualized energy for selfless contribution.
So if we pull back and look at the whole arc, Italy for pleasure, India for discipline and interconnection, Bali for balance and contribution.
It's a clear progression, a journey from fulfilling external expectations through intense internal work towards defining and living an authentic life based on self-knowledge, self-love, and eventually service. It's all about that relentless, conscious effort to build a life that actually fits who you are.
A quest for what the Greeks called eudaimonia, human flourishing, not just temporary happiness.
Exactly. That's the ideal it's reaching for.
Okay. But as we hinted earlier, this book, despite its massive popularity, maybe because of it, attracted a lot of criticism. And a big part of that centered on privilege.
A huge part. This is probably the most common critique you hear. The idea that the entire journey, the solution she finds, is just inaccessible to most people.
Because who can just take a year off work and travel the world?
Precisely. Critics argued it endorses running away from your life in a way that's only possible with significant financial resources. That book advance looms large here. Renting nice places, eating out constantly in Rome, language tutors, the cost of the ashram. It all adds up.
So the feeling was that her solutions were trivial, pampered solutions to complex problems. Solutions only available to the wealthy elite.
That was the argument.
Yeah.
That it presents this fantasy of escape and self-discovery as a universal path, when in reality, it's predicated on a level of privilege most people simply don't have.
Did Gilbert herself ever respond to that charge? The accusation of selfishness or privilege?
She did. She had a pretty pointed response, actually. She kind of turned it back on the culture, particularly American culture.
Oh, so?
She questioned the American obsession with productivity and responsibility. Why, she asked, is it so hard for us, especially women, to allow ourselves time to figure things out, to solve the puzzle of our own lives before it's too late?
So framing it not as selfish indulgence, but as necessary self-preservation. A kind of self-care that society often denies women.
That was her counter-argument, that taking that time, even radically, wasn't selfish, but essential, and perhaps something society should value more, not condemn.
Interesting. But the criticism didn't stop at privilege, did it? There were deeper critiques, particularly from scholars, about how she portrayed the cultures she visited.
Right. This gets into territory often discussed under the heading of Orientalism.
Orientalism, explain that a bit.
It's a term most famously used by Edward Said to describe a way the West often views the East, the Orient, as exotic, mystical, unchanging, and often implicitly inferior, or existing primarily for the benefit or enlightenment of the West.
So the accusation was that eat, pray, love used Eastern cultures in that way.
That was the critique, that India and Indonesia in particular were presented as sort of spiritual commodities, places the white Western protagonist goes to get fixed to find herself, and that the local people sometimes risked becoming colorful cultural props in her personal drama, rather than fully realized individuals in their own complex societies.
Can you give some specific examples of where people saw this happening in the book?
Sure. Even the Italy section got some flack. Italian critics complained it just reinforced old stereotypes, everyone eating pasta, gesticulating wildly, you know the cliches.
Okay. And for India and Indonesia?
In India, the critique was that the Afram experience felt very insulated, like a spiritual Disneyland, disconnected from the broader realities of Indian life and poverty outside its walls. There was specific criticism of a passage where she observes seemingly happy, impoverished women smashing rocks beside the road. Critics saw this as romanticizing poverty, looking at it through a detached, almost colonial gaze without engaging with the harsh realities.
Right. Seeing the picturesque surface without the underlying struggle.
Exactly. And in Bali, similar concerns were raised about characters like Ketut and Wayan. The argument was that they sometimes felt one-dimensional, existing primarily to serve Liz's journey of self-discovery.
Even though Ketut was her teacher and she helped Wayan significantly.
Yes, the critique isn't necessarily about her intentions, but about the narrative structure. Ketut, the wise medicine man, is initially described by Liz, maybe humorously, as seeming demented. And while the fundraising for Wayan is presented as altruistic, some critics saw it through the lens of saviorism.
Saviorism.
The dynamic where a privileged Westerner swoops in to save a less privileged non-Westerner. While the help is real, the narrative focus can sometimes unintentionally reinforce colonial-era ideas about the West having the answers or resources that the East lacks, framed within a narrative of global sisterhood or charity. It's a complex dynamic.
Very complex. And this complexity seems to extend right to the very end, especially concerning gender roles and female empowerment.
Oh, absolutely. This is probably the most hotly debated aspect among feminist readers and critics.
So the conflict is, she breaks free from traditional marriage, rejects motherhood, finds her own strength. But then she ends up with Felipe.
And specifically ends up with Felipe, who offers to take care of you forever. That phrase, take care of you, really rubs some people the wrong way.
Why? What was the issue with that?
The argument is that after this whole epic journey towards self-reliance and independence, the ultimate resolution is finding happiness and completion in a relationship with a man who explicitly frames himself as her protector or provider.
So it felt like a retreat back into traditional gender roles?
For some critics, yes. It seemed to reinforce a patriarchal ideal that a woman's story isn't truly complete without a man, that she ultimately needs or wants to be taken care of. Having spent years losing herself in relationships, did she just fall back into that pattern, even with a seemingly good man?
Did she trade spiritual seeking for romantic dependency?
That's the provocative question critics raised. Does the ending undermine the hard-won independence she achieved in India and the self-possession she cultivated in Bali?
How does the book itself seem to handle that tension?
Well, the narrative frames it as a choice made from strength. That because she found herself, she was now able to choose partnership without dissolving into it. That accepting care from Felipe wasn't a sign of weakness, but of her being whole enough to receive love fully.
But you can see why people would debate that interpretation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a genuinely ambiguous ending in terms of its message about female independence versus romantic fulfillment. It definitely provides a neat, perhaps too neat, romantic conclusion that might feel at odds with the radical nature of the journey that preceded it.
It really highlights how complex it is to integrate that hard-won, authentic self back into the messy reality of relationships and the world.
It really does. But regardless of the criticisms, the transformation she undergoes through this very structured, very intentional self-exploration is undeniable. The journey itself powerfully underscores that finding balance, that anti-Vassan state living at the border, isn't a destination you just arrive at.
It's an ongoing process.
It's an active state. It requires constant attention, continuous self-inquiry. She learned she was the administrator of her own rescue, And that administration doesn't stop just because the year's over. Whether you're traveling the world or just sitting in your living room, that balancing act continues.
Which kind of leads us to a final thought to leave everyone with, something to chew on. The book shows this massive achievement, finding pleasure, finding spiritual connection, finding balance, finding love. But it also emphasizes that this isn't a happily ever after where the work stops.
Right. She's very clear about that.
Liz herself says happiness has to be fought for, strived for, insisted upon. And once you find it, you can't get complacent. You have to keep swimming upward into that happiness forever, making a mighty effort. So if the goal is balance, equipoise, what does it really mean if that balance has to be maintained relentlessly?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Is self-actualization, is true happiness a place you reach? Or is it actually this constant, maybe even exhausting battle against our own tendencies towards, I don't know, inertia, complacency, inner chaos?
That realization that the maintenance is the real work, the true mastery, long after the journey ends, that might just be the most profound and perhaps the most challenging takeaway from her whole experience. It's the part that applies to everyone, whether you take a year off or not.
A lot to think about there. This was it on today's book, guys. And guys, kindly subscribe and follow us for more such insights on various books. And also, do not forget to join our social media community to stay in touch and get updated.